Hi everyone, I'm speaking to you today from this rather cold church space because I wanted to, in our e-news this week, address getting back in person, physically meeting again here on a Sunday. I'm going to allow myself to be a little bit longer than usual and you'll understand why. You've probably heard that on Thursday night the government announced further liftings of the restrictions that have prevented us meeting here on a Sunday for the last 11 weeks. I want you all to know how much of the reason for those changes being announced now is from the work of our Archbishop Glenn Davies and the Roman Catholic Archbishop Anthony Fisher. They had intense discussions with the state government on Tuesday. In fact, Glenn first heard that these changes were coming when he received a personal phone call last night from the State Health Minister Brad Hazzard about them. Isn't it good that we were praying for Glenn and for Bishop Chris Edwards as well in our prayers last Sunday? Hasn't he served us well? And if you didn't know, our wonderful godly Archbishop is actually St Mark's son. He spent the first 13 or 14 years of his life here. His father was a church warden, I think at the time this building was built, and Glenn returned as a student minister when Ken Gilmore was rector. The most prominent aspect of the latest announcement is that from Monday 1st of June, religious gatherings will be able to accommodate up to 50 people in the church building. They are still required, of course, to be socially distanced. A couple of weeks ago, one of our wardens, Maurice Glasson, actually measured the church and found that on the basis of the 4 metre square rule, St Mark's church base can actually accommodate 55 people. So it's good news that our building will be large enough to accommodate the maximum 50 people. I don't know that would have been possible if it weren't for those renovations we had back in 2017. I've heard of churches that still have pews that have to skip every second row to observe social distancing, even though they might be able to meet the 4 metre square rule. I hope you and your family won't need to concern yourself with this additional detail, but the 50-person rule applies to funerals as well. Weddings are still limited at 20 people. It seems because some of the COVID-19 restrictions have been traced back to wedding groups. Now, it's really important that we don't focus on the 50 persons and overlook the strict requirements that have been imposed around this permission. Church won't look like it did when we last physically met on March the 15th. We have to observe COVID-safe practices for opening our churches by implementing procedures around recording everyone who attends, the provision of hand sanitizer, the non-provision of Bibles, hymn books and prayer books, through maintaining social distancing at all times, and through cleaning the building after each service. I said service, not Sunday. So it's quite onerous. 10 days ago, Parish Council began to talk about what might be involved in opening up St Mark's. At the time, it was only to be for groups of up to 10 people. Now we have this welcome extension to 50 people. Following Parish Council, our church wardens got to work on the procedures St Mark's would be following. Paul Chapman particularly worked hard to draft a document which incorporates all the diocesan and New South Wales health guidelines. And over this coming weekend, that'll be reviewed in the light of the new development. It happens to be the monthly meeting of the wardens on this coming Monday night. So that's rather convenient as we decide what we're going to do with Sunday, June the 6th in mind. So please pray for wisdom and love for Paul, for Amelia, for Morris, and for myself as we deliberate. One of the primary considerations we need to have is how we serve those who may not be able to attend a service due to a pre-existing health condition that makes it best for them to continue to socially isolate. We're looking at how to continue to provide something for you on Zoom, as we have been doing when the church begins to meet physically again. And that is not as easy to do as you might imagine, however. One of the aspects of the new guidelines that troubles me is that up to 50 people can gather, but only one of those 50 people can sing. Yes, congregational singing is banned. The one would be someone like a solo song leader who has to maintain the usual social distance by doubling the distance between him or herself and any other members in the congregation. In a letter to his clergy, Bishop Edwards this morning explained the ban further, and here's an interesting quote. The New South Wales Chief Health Officer, Dr. Kerry Chant, has told us quite clearly that while singing is not yet illegal, it is inadvisable. She told us singing is like a controlled cough. She also noted that churches and choirs had been centres of COVID-19 infection elsewhere, and that this was one of the government's key concerns associated with congregational gatherings recommencing. We've been researching this, and I have to say the medical evidence on the risks of singing is inconclusive. However, there's sufficient evidence of a possible correlation between singing and increased rates of infection that it's appropriate that we take precautions just in case. It's the responsible and the loving thing to do. Now, those of you who never sing out loud in church have found an excuse founded in love for others. And who could argue with that? For most of us, though, we are going to miss singing. What is church without singing? Of course, in some places, the emphasis is already low on congregational singing and high on a more concert style out from the front. But that is not St. Mark's, nor is it the biblical model. Nor do we believe that aberration of worship theology that suggests that singing brings us any closer to God than we already are in Jesus Christ. Yet, it won't really feel like church without singing. Today, someone wondered whether, in fact, it would be better to remain on Zoom and only physical meet when we can sing together. Now, that's an interesting thought. One plus I can see in all this is shorter services or time for longer sermons. No, I'm just joking about that, about the sermons anyway. Seriously, we can, as God's people, still meet around His Word, respond to Him in trust with prayer and obedience, and encourage and teach each other via Bible reading and teaching and other testimony. In other words, we can still do church without congregational singing. I'm going to be consulting with the musicians, with the wardens and other church leaders as part of gathering input into the warden's decisions. Also on Monday, Lisa and I are going to be thinking through the impact of the 50-person rule and the opening up of church on our children's ministry. One obvious implication will be that since the 945 congregation is generally well over the 50-person limit, we're going to need to give priority to families with children in the Little Sparks Kids Church and Switch ministries, and also for the leaders of each of those ministries, before others can then take one of the 50 spots. I need to clarify a thought from another minister that we may not have to count the children and ministry leaders in the 50 if they do not come up to the church for the first part of the service, as has been our traditional approach. Another implication of the 50-person limit is that 945ers, you need to recognise that some of you will have to choose to attend either 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. service, and I hope you'll be generous about that. On Monday this week, Rob Smith of 945 sent me a verse he'd enjoyed in his daily Bible reading. It stayed with me all week, and I've tried with some success to live it out at all times. It is from Colossians chapter 3, verse 17, and the apostle says, "And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, Do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Whatever we do about opening up the church space for public Sunday services, we must do it in the name of the Lord Jesus. I take it that means being his ambassador, his voice, his hands and feet in the way we go about loving others, our decisions, our guidelines, our behaviour at church, our organisation. Please pray for each other in the coming weeks that we'll obey Colossians 3 verse 17 as we undergo further change and adaptation. On this Sunday, on Zoom, my friend Richard Shumack is our guest speaker. Richard's experienced in Islamic evangelism and he always has the greatest stories, better stories than mine. I'm really looking forward to his ministry to us. In preparation though, why don't you read over Numbers 13 and 14? See you then.